What's up everybody, True Evil here, and today I am going to be breaking down the healers in Etheria Restart and how they worked well together, which shells you should prioritize for the healers, as well as just general makeup and which ones excel in the different aspects of the game. I think this is really important because as we push into that in-game content, I do believe healers are going to make or break it, especially with how to build them. So without further ado, let's just dive right in there. So before we even talk about the specific healers and the breakdown of them, let's go over the most important shells to use for the healers, because there are a lot of specific shells that are really great in certain scenarios, and it's just really important to know why you would use one shell over the other one. And the first one I have here is my Ling Luo's main shell, which is Supernova. And the reason why I have this shell as my main one is because I focus on PvP, and Bulwark is pretty much a necessity on Ling Luo on that first turn to make sure she doesn't get CC'd into Oblivion. Now, this also works really well in anti-sync echoes when there's like two Krakens on the enemy's team, or a lot of debuffs to worry about, as well as the Swift Rush, and it makes that first initial heal much stronger so that you're able to just redo after getting halfway cleaved or something like that. But I don't recommend this shell for a lot of PvE content, just because you're going to need to cycle a lot with these healers, and Supernova doesn't really help with that. What shells really help with cycling is Gigabyte. Now, Gigabyte is going to be a shell you're going to build in a lot of different ways. The most recommended one, in my opinion, is going to be 3 Swift Rush, 3 Wellspring, and that is because the healers that scale off HP, like Sonya and Mia, are really going to benefit from the Wellspring, and it's going to make them extra tanky. Not only that, but Sonya heals off her skill 1, so because you're gaining that 35% turn meter pretty much every turn, just because all of the threshold bosses have multiple enemies, whereas in Aurora there's the 2 ads, Terramaton there's the arms, and Doki it's just 4 to 5 enemies. So you're definitely going to trigger this every turn, which means the more cycles, the more heals, and that's really important. Having 2 healers on your team with Gigabyte pretty much means that you're going to be really safe, even in those harder contents like Hell 4 and Inferno. I would really recommend building 2 gigabytes for your healers, and some of the healers do not benefit off Wellspring, so for those, there's 2 options if you don't want that flat HP, which if you don't have the final matrix, it's always nice to have 12 Wellspring, 12 Swift Rush, but you could go for 12 Swift Rush, 12 Time Weave. And this is especially important since we're only a couple of weeks into the game and we haven't invested lattices most likely into our healers. So Ling Luo's cooldowns are going to be rather high, so having something like Time Weave to make sure that you're able to proc her heals consistently is really important, because I would rather be spamming skill 3 on Ling Luo than her skill 1. So Time Weave can really help with that. And the other one that I would recommend is Cure, which although it does give some HP, not as much as Wellspring, it does increase the healing by 25%, which is really huge. And I would really recommend getting that Gigabyte and just having 2. It's going to just make your life so much easier, and it pretty much works with every piece of content in the game. Now, after the Gigabyte, there is other shells to look at, and the next one we're going to look at is Fortissimo. Now, Fortissimo is a really strong one because it stores the actual healing and applies it when it is needed. And this is pretty important because if you're in a spot like, say, Aurora, where you need to hit a certain amount of threshold of heals, or just something where you're healing too much on your first couple of turns, and then on the third turn or fourth turn, for example, you really need extra healing power versus what you actually have on your team. Fortissimo is really going to come in clutch in those situations. Now, I think this shell is a PvE shell majority of the times, because in PvP you're pretty much going to want to have that max amount of healing, so having it store is not the best. But this is a really amazing shell, but most of the time I would use this shell is in very specific situations or paired with a second healer who has the Gigabyte, because this one does not offer as many turns as the other options. Now, the other last shell we haven't touched on that I think is really important to pick out is going to be Jackal Guard. Now, Jackal Guard is going to be an extremely beneficial shell for a lot of people, and that is because of the bulwark, but it's also an offensive shell, which gives speed up. So instead of using Gigabyte, you're opting to have that speed up, which can be really helpful if turn meter for some reason is getting affected, and having speed up is more beneficial, as well as that extra attack. Now, we do get turn meter by 25%, so it really just depends on which one you find better. Most of the time, I feel like Gigabyte is better. So yeah, Jackal Guard is definitely an option, but I do think Gigabyte is better most of the time. And the fifth shell, which is going to probably be the worst one for most of them, is Halloween. Now, it is an option, but I think that the 80% chance of having a skill cooldown randomly lowered is not as beneficial as just having more turns, having that speed up, and just cycling through the character more. And because of that, I can't really recommend it. Now, it is helpful on some healers who don't have a skill 1 that really heals, and you rely on, say, just the skill 3. But I would say those healers are not as strong as the ones that do have a skill 1 heal, so wouldn't really recommend that shell to anyone. So that's all of the shell breakdowns. Let's just go to the characters. The first healer I'm going to talk about is Valerian, because she's rather unique, as she isn't the best healer initially in the game, but once you max out her skill 3, she becomes one of the best healers for a lot of content. And that is because in certain aspects of the game, it's very easy to get one-shotted. For example, when you just start doing Terramaton, it is really common when you start Hell 3 and Hell 4 for Terramaton to just one-shot one of your allies and just end the fight instantly. What her skill 3 does is, if any of your teammates are knocked out, they are rezzed with some heal, and then she loses this Hazy Dream. Now, this makes her a shielder rather than a full-on healer, so she is rather unique with that aspect, because she is just a stick that gives people shields when they start their turns and basic buffs, and she has a heal over a time and invincibility. But because she's a bubble, she is really nice. She can't get CC'd. The only problem with her not being CC'd is that she can't gain turn meter, which also affects her. So because of that, it's rather awkward pairing her with a lot of units in the game. For example, Doki Doki, if Doki Doki uses their skill 3 and it targets Valerian, basically it'll just keep targeting Valerian, and the turn meter will just, nothing happens. So you need to watch out for things like that, but it is really helpful to have her with, say, a character like Chiako, who can boost everyone on the turn meter, so they're all going above Valerian and getting those shields and cycling quicker. Now, she does have this awkward phase where there's a turn or two where she isn't going to be able to use her Hazy Dream just because of the cooldown. So what you do to fix that is either raise the duration of her buffs or have something like Time Weave. Right now, what I am doing is I am rocking 12 Time Weave on her to make sure that she is able to really keep up with her buffs. And you want to also be running Wellspring with her. And as you can see, I am running Artisan as my shield just because I don't have a Gigabyte I would like to use with her yet. Gigabyte is a weird shell because a lot of the shells boost turn meter in this game and she doesn't gain it. But the good thing about Gigabyte is that it can cover the two things that she wants, Time Weave and Wellspring. And when she does break out of Hazy Dream, she can gain turn meter. So this is essentially going to help her speed up the process of getting back into her skill 3 as quickly as possible. So because we talked about how beneficial it is when her buffs are raised in duration, let's go and talk about the two healers that really pair well with that. And this healer, Ling Luo, is arguably the best healer in the game. Because of her AoE heal, it can cleanse and give immunity. And it just heals more with the amount of buffs you have. Not only that, but her skill 2 extends all allies' buffs by 1 turn. And this is going to be really helpful since Valerian's skill 3 gives Hazy Dream, and this can increase that duration, as well as increase the duration of all of Valerian's buffs that she gives, like the basic buffs. So instead of having that 1 turn, that when it goes back to their turn, they lose the buff, so you can't really stack multiple buffs with Valerian. Using a extender is going to make it so you will be able to have multiple buffs with Valerian and make her absolutely insane. Not only that, but immunity just makes Ling Luo huge, and she has a cleanse effect with Rockstar that purifies, and this is going to be one of the biggest things with her because she's a cleanser, heals like absolute crazy, and she applies Whale's Prayer. Whale Prayer at the start of your turn recovers 5% of max HP up to 5 stacks, and being able to increase the duration of Whale Prayer is really essential because once you get multiple stacks of that, you really get the ball going and having incredible amounts of healing. Everyone, I believe, should have Ling Luo on their account. On day 7, you get her for free, and she is definitely a character you're going to want to 5 to 6 star pretty much immediately because she's great in almost all content as a healer that grants immunity. Now, what do you do with a character that can increase the buff duration? Well, that pairs extremely well with another healer who can increase buff duration, which is Mia. Now, Mia is sort of like a Ling Luo light, where with Ling Luo's skill 1, it provides 2 characters with healing. What this does is a single character gets a 2-turn shield. With that, it's actually really important because her AoE also extends duration of all buffs and shortens debuffs. So when you pair this with like Ling Luo, who extends all the Whale Prayers buffs, all the immunity buffs, and then you have Mia extend all of those buffs together with the shield also getting extended, you just have crazy amounts of buffs for pretty much forever. And Mia also has this really nice D-spell that has a pushback on it, which is definitely no joke in a lot of this in-game content. So the two of them paired together is an absolutely monster combo, as well as Mia is also another person who can extend Valerian's buffs and make Valerian great. Now, the other thing that you really need to pick out with Mia and why she is so good in, say, Inferno content is because of Rainbow Blessing. For every 1 buff carried by allies, Mia gains a 3.5% damage reduction up to 8 stacks, which means that she gets over 25% damage reduction, and this is going to be huge in modes like Inferno where you take a bazillion damage. And I haven't seen anyone so far really lattice her up, but I can imagine once this is at 5%, you have a 40% damage reduction possibility that Mia can be absolutely insane. Now, since we are talking about damage reduction, let's go to another red healer that, although she is way more niche than the healers we just talked about, I do believe that Mia, Ling Luo, and Valerian are the three biggest healers in the game currently in terms of pushing content. Chiaki is going to come up a lot in PvP. That's because she doesn't extend the buffs and she's sort of a little bit less on the healing side. She does heal someone with her single target attack, but it's just not as strong as, say, Ling Luo and Sonya and Mia's heal. But the thing with Chiaki that makes her absolutely insane is her unique buff, which is Origami Guardian, which for each stack of that when they're attacked, it consumes one of the stacks on it, and the damage taken is reduced by 35%. So in any content where like you're getting hit for a rather large amount with a single target attack, being able to just put 5 stacks or 1 stack or how many stacks of Guardian you can really apply to yourself, and you know, it's going to be really helpful. Chiaki can really make sure that your characters do not get hurt, and in PvP can sort of just set out a giant wall if you pair her with something like a Viper, and just you're not going to get hurt. And she's really strong. The only problem is we're early in the game and it's really hard to develop a niche character like that at the moment, but you know, still really good. Speaking of another SR healer, which a lot of people are going to use on their accounts, is Sonya. Now, Sonya did get changed between the final test and launch of the game. More specifically, previously, when it was her turn, if she was frozen or stunned, she would recover from that end her turn, but because her passive triggers at the end of the turn, it would heal the two weakest members and have a cleanse effect. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way anymore, but she is still a definitely strong healer and is one of the best pairs for healers with Tiamat because her revive also functions as a just max HP increaser. So anyone who scales off HP is going to be extremely powerful with Sonya. And this is also a revive, which there's not a whole lot of characters in this game that can revive, so this is going to be huge. More importantly, because her passive triggers off her skill 1, she is one of the best characters to use a Gigabyte with, because she has the best skill 1 in terms of healing, because she's going to gain 30% turn meter once increased every time she attacks. So that means that her heal, which is going to be the strongest of all the skill 1s once fully upgraded, is going to just purify 1. There's not a chance like Ling Luo's, and you're just going to absolutely cycle like crazy using Gigabyte, which if you're able to increase turn meter by 30%, have a couple people have their turn, boost up 35%, and then Gigabyte is ready to start getting stacks again, that's pretty much gaining 65% turn meter just by herself every single turn, which means she's going to cycle like absolute crazy. And definitely is a character that you really want to focus on. Unfortunately, because she can't really get out of a stun, you are going to need to pair with someone who can be able to cleanse. So pairing her with someone like Etheria or a Doki Doki is going to be extremely helpful. Now, the reason I don't have her leveled on my account is because, first off, I have too many green units already, and I really needed to focus on other healers so that I was able to clear content like Rally. But she is definitely one of the characters I'm going to be maxing out relatively soon once I'm able to really be able to focus on my content and be able to clear Inferno. Now, her revive is definitely the thing that makes her absolutely a monster in PvP, because it's just absolutely broken, as well as just making people's HPs a giant sponge. Now, The thing with her is that previously, because she could cleanse herself and just work even if she was CC'd, the downside of her is that you're pretty much going to want Bulwark with her if you're doing PvP, so she can get out of any stuns on the first turn so she can do her thing. But she doesn't really work well with anything except like a Jackal Guard. And I would say that Gigabyte is still better. So you're going to need to like focus in with her if you're going to use her. And I would say Gigabyte is still her best shell, but you're going to want to make sure that you don't pick her into a team that has a bunch of stun, like say a Kraken or a Mio. But even then, with a Mio, she can still work because most of the time people don't go for that freeze on the skill 2 as their initial setup. So, yeah. So, with these healers, you can pretty much see that having two of them is going to work really well, especially the ones that buff all those durations. So, what I would focus on for in-game content if you're struggling is having something like a Ling Luo plus a Sonya and really upgrading them. And then once you get to a point where it's say I need a D-spell as well, you can switch Mia in. So say against Aurora, you can use Ling Luo and Mia, so you have the D-spell on the immunity, as well as both of them extend their buffs. Then on Terramatan, especially on the later content where you need healing and D-spells and all those things, using Mia plus Valerian is going to be extremely strong in those scenarios. So there's a lot of different ways you can pair these healers, and even in something like Doki Doki, you could use Sonya plus Ling Luo, but usually because you have to have a CC, most people are going to go with the one healer route. But you definitely can do something like Sonya plus Valerian for that game mode. So you're definitely going to want to have 2 to 3 healers on your account, and just knowing how they break down like that is going to be really important on who to pick. And unfortunately, not everyone is going to have Mia on their account because she is an SSR, and most people won't use the selector on her. They'll use it for a DPS like Rosa, a bruiser like Rahu, or a support unit like Klaus. So really need to figure out which ones are on your accounts and pick 3 to build. So hopefully this explanation of the healers was helpful for you guys. If there's any other type of content you would like explained, please leave it in the comment and I'll try to make a video about it this week. So see you guys next time.